Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our seventh webinar under the banner One on Education. It's absolutely wonderful to see so many of you logged in with us here today for this event. I am Smita Matai, Senior Product Specialist, Orient Black Swan. We are delighted to introduce our speaker of the day, Dr. Aruna Ravichandran. Dr. Aruna Ravichandran is an educational consultant and a freelance author and editor. She not only has 2 decades of academic experience, but has also acquired publishing experience along the way. She has worked in different CBSE schools in various leadership capacities and has had an exemplary stint as a school head in one of the leading schools in Chennai. She has also been officiating principal in Kendriya Vidyalaya several times. She has conducted several science and environmental studies workshops and refresher courses for teachers. She has developed science and environmental studies textbooks for classes 1 to 5 and edited a series of semester books and term books for primary school. As educators, we all know that students construct their own knowledge based on their experience and real life integration. This is the basis of the constructive approach. There is a lot of emphasis on this approach in the new education policy. In today's webinar, Dr. Aruna Ravichandran is going to walk us through this approach and also talk to us about experiential learning and assessments. Thank you, Dr. Ravichandran, for so readily accepting our invitation to speak. Over
My
to
pleasure.
your session on the online science classroom, real life integration and assessment.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. It's nice to see all of us having gathered together for discussing on a very current topic. It's the online classroom. And today we are focusing on the online science classroom. And the two very important aspects we are going to look at is real life integration and assessment. Nice to have all of you here, at least on the virtual platform. We are able to discuss, share our thoughts with one another during the course of this pandemic. Let's see now. What is it we are going to discuss today? Look at the picture on the right. You can see this is how it appears in most homes, I should say. We have the teacher delivering her lecture, the classes, students in various parts of, the city or the country or whatsoever. And what are the things we are going to discuss today with reference to this kind of a situation? The NEP 2020 and real life integration, experiential learning in science, how to make online classes engaging, tips to teach the key concepts online, integrating science with real life, and assessment. Now, what is one of the major focuses of NEP 2020? In fact, when our Prime Minister first brought this to the notice of the nation, then this was what he had to say. NEP 2020 will ensure the holistic development of learners. We have to advance our students with the 21st century skills. These skills will be the 5 C's: critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, curiosity, and communication. Now, let's see, why are these important? How do they help us out in the 21st century? Now, the 21st century skills that are believed by educators, employers, and other relevant people to be critically important to success in today's world are knowledge, skills, work habits, and character traits. These skills enable an individual to face the challenges of the 21st century world, that is globally active, digitally transforming, collaboratively moving forward, creatively progressing, seeking competent human resource, and quick in adopting changes. So, in short, if we adjust to the changing times, we are going to be successful. And that is what our endeavor is going to be, to help our students be successful in the changing times. Now, Wagner in 2010 and the Change Leadership Group at Harvard University, they identified another set of skills and competencies. And he said students need 7 survival skills to be prepared for the 21st century life, work, and citizenship. And these different skills, like collaboration, leadership, agility and adaptability, initiative and entrepreneurship ability, effective oral and written communication. See, that is why today all of us stress on effective communication, both oral and written. Then accessing and analyzing available content. Now, NEP and real life integration. How is it going to be connected to the real life situation? And why is it we need it? Let's look at it. Now, the world is undergoing a rapid change. We find plenty of data around. We extract a lot of information from this data. There is a lot of machine learning automation. Then we have artificial intelligence. This is another emerging field. Now, all these lead to unskilled jobs worldwide being taken over by machines. But at the same time, there is an increased need for skilled workforce. Now, the demand for the skilled workforce pertains to mathematics, computer science, data science, multidisciplinary abilities across the sciences, social science, and humanities. The world today is facing the threat of climate change, increasing pollution, depleting natural resources. Consequently, the world's food sanitation needs have to be met in all possible ways. This will again require new skilled labor in the field of biology, chemistry, physics, agriculture, climate science, and social science. So, do we see a return to the pure sciences? Yes, that is what seems to be happening. Now, what does this tell us? Yes, a very current and burning topic of the past 9 months. Here, what we find is something that emerged in the month of maybe November, December, and that's the time, when we thought it's happening somewhere in some corner of the world. But in no time, it turned out to be a pandemic affecting everybody in every corner of the world. Now, what has that led to? See, humanity is always ready to face any challenge. So now the growing incident of epidemics, pandemics, it calls for collaborative research. And this is for infectious disease management and the development of vaccines. Gone are the days when, vaccines could be developed only by certain people in certain parts of the world. Now it is every scientist in every corner with able support from the government is trying to find a way out of this situation. Now, what's the focus of pedagogy of NEP 2020? This particular picture that you see, it's actually conveys a lot of things besides the 2 or 3 lines at the bottom. See, same old paper, he said. I think it's an exaggeration, but there's a lot of truth in saying that when you go to school, the trauma is that you must stop learning and you must accept what is being taught. So, this was how, we had the initial schooling phase in humanity. uh, it was the teacher knew everything, so we listen to the teacher. The teacher is always correct, and we quietly accept that. We never dare question. But now the things have changed, and it would be very nice, if every teacher looks at this and thinks about this little clipping every day, before they go to class. The quickly emerging employment landscape and global ecosystem makes it critical that education moves towards less content, gives importance to critical thinking and problem solving skills, encourages students to be creative and multidisciplinary, inspires students to innovate, and motivates students to adapt and absorb new material in novel and changing fields. Now, what's the focus of pedagogy of NEP 2020? Pedagogy must evolve to make education more experiential, holistic, integrated, inquiry driven, learner centric, discussion based, flexible, enjoyable. Here we find the difference in how the earlier academic structure was and the current academic structure is. See, earlier, it was initially, the, you could call it the kindergarten phase. Then we had the schooling of 10 years. Then we had the plus two, that is pre-college. Now, there is a slight difference, but it is very clearly mentioned. It's the initial 3 years stays as such, and next it becomes 2 plus 3 plus 3 plus the 4 years, which is actually from standard 9 to standard 12. um, Here what we find is, we have the foundation stage, the preparatory stage, the middle stage, and the secondary stage. So it's very clearly mentioned what kind of teaching should happen at every stage. um, the most important part here is children are taught not only to learn, but how to learn. They learn how to learn. Now, here's another interesting thing. Experiential learning is the method of learning through doing. It involves activity-based approach where students have the first-hand experiences with the materials rather than learning through someone else's experiences printed in textbooks or through a lecture. So Kolbe's experiential learning, this focuses on four major aspects of the learning process: concrete experience, observation, and abstract conceptualization, and active experimentation. So here what we find is, initially the child is given the chance to experience what he's going to be taught. Then he actually, observes it. After that, he tries to find out what went wrong, how could he improve it, and all that. And based on this, he takes up active experimentation. So this is actually a very interesting method of, learning by doing. Now, in science, exactly how do we do this? Of course, always, when we say experiments, that deals with science. It is in the science subject that we do a lot of experiments. It is often said, no, experiment, observe, derive your inference. So what are the main features here? Student engagement and understanding of materials is given more emphasis in today's education over just spoon feeding of facts. So using blackboards or the typical lecture methods is just not adequate to teach either science or other related subjects. Another thing, more than just conveying facts or the findings in science, students will love to explore the world of science on their own. The innovative teaching methods in science can substitute the typical teaching techniques to achieve the goal. Let's now look at the comparison between Kolbe's experiential learning and Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom's taxonomy was actually a theory, which all the B.Ed students should definitely be familiar with. Now, how come this experiential learning is kind of based on the Bloom's taxonomy, but it's an improvement according to the demands of the present times. So in Kolbe's experiential learning, we look at concrete experience. So this is actually what we spoke of as applying the learning to whatever we used to see in Bloom's taxonomy. Next, We speak of reflection of whatever we have learned, thinking about whatever we have learned. And in Bloom's taxonomy, that becomes analyzing the content learned. Next, in Kolbe's experiential learning, we form new concepts. I mean, learning has happened, makes us think, and gives rise to newer concepts. The same thing in Bloom's taxonomy, that is creating, coming up with new thoughts, new ideas. Then in Kolbe's learning, we test whatever we have learned. And in Bloom's taxonomy, it is called evaluating the content learned. So thus we find it is always, more or less the same process, but coming up in a slightly different way with different names. Now, here you can see a beautiful pictorial depiction of Cole's experiential learning. So initially, here's a child who's getting a cycle, very thrilled to do that, and just wants to take it out and keep riding the whole day. That's what I've seen children doing often. They just are thrilled at the very prospect of, having a cycle under their control. Now, as they keep riding it, they find a number of things, by themselves. Like if I press the right brake, what happens? If I press the left brake, what happens? So it is, they find it as they ride it. Next, so that's the second step. That is their observation. First one, they got the experience, actual experience. They were not just looking at a cycle, they are riding a cycle now. Next is actual observation. Then it led to, abstract conceptualization. So now they realize that the next time I ride the cycle, I should remember that if I want to slow down, I have to press the left brake. If I by mistake press the right brake, I'm going to have a fall. So you see, this is what they have, understood what happened during their actual experience, and now they are making use of that to improve their next experience. Then after this, they'll be, so by this time, they are very clear about the mechanism of the cycle. And now in the fourth step, there is an experimentation. What do? They try a lot of tricks, and sometimes, they come very fast and suddenly lift up the front wheel. So I've often seen boys doing this. So that is the confidence the first three steps have given them. Okay, now in the fourth step, they are trying out new experiments. So this is exactly how learning happens. Now, in the science classroom, especially from our upper primary, I could say from standard third onwards, what are the very interesting things we can try out? See, there's something magical about mixing colors together to create another color. Now, we can take three little bowls or cups, and we have the primary colors, red, blue, and yellow. Give it to them and take a little dropper or a spoon or something and give them the chance of mixing the colors and seeing the result. Initially when they mix the color, ask them what could be the result, and actually when they mix it, find out is the result matching with what they had guessed. If it matches, they would be thrilled. Okay, otherwise they find out. So what do? Here's it. Allow them to mix yellow color and red color, get an orange, yellow and blue, get a green color, then blue and red, they get a violet or a dark blue color. Now, you can now ask a question, what if all the three colors are mixed, blue, yellow and red, what will be your result? Now, they would be very happy to say that it's a black color. Another interesting experiment, the float and the sink. Now, the law of flotation, this is something children learn right up to their +2 level. Definitely in the 10th and even up to the +2, the ones who go for the sciences. So, the way our ships move about in water, then swimming exercises of children. So all these, have in some way, some connection with the process of flotation. And so this is a concept they learn from a very small class, standard 1, 2 onwards. So how can they find it out? Again, have a bowl of water with you. Even if it's an online class, you can show that. Then take a lot of easily available material. You can take plastic toys, aluminum foil, balloons, blown up balloons, then apple, orange, then plastic bottles, then paper, rubber balls, pencil, eraser, sponges, a stone, like that. The list is endless. And ask the child to put each one in the bowl of water and see how it behaves, whether it is floating on the surface or it is sinking inside. Now, when the child does this with each and every object, then he would be very surprised to see the difference in the behavior. Next, ask the child, to fill in this tabular column. The object, did he think it will float or sink? Then once he does the experiment, observes what happens, and he repeats it, observes what happens and ticks the particular word, whether it's floating or sinking. Now, at the end of this, what is happening? The child is discovering that certain objects tend to float and certain objects sink. So this is, learning by discovery, and then you can build on that, talking more about the actual process. Here's another interesting experiment that can be done in the class. You can try to fill a balloon with some air of our own, that is, which is created in the lab, taking the help of vinegar and baking soda, which are harmless, easily available substances. So you have a bottle in which you are taking vinegar, then you are having a funnel on top of it, in which we can have a blown up balloon with baking soda inside it. So we are properly securing the base of the balloon to the bottle. And once this is properly fixed, next, slowly shake the balloon and the funnel inside, so that, drop by drop, little by little, the soda enters the bottle, and there's a chance for vinegar and baking soda to react. And as they react, we know that they end up producing carbon dioxide gas. Now this, when slowly it goes up, it, fills up the balloon, okay, properly. But remember, if you don't tie the base of the balloon properly, the balloon will just fly off. So here they see how two substances, when allowed to react, they produce a gas which can help in swelling up or filling up the balloon. Again, this is something they can do and observe. Here's another interesting experiment which children generally love to do, during the project day in school. All of them have definitely read about volcanoes, volcanic eruption. So this is actually, a volcano that can be made in the lab. So they can use some clay or this mountain paper, make a small volcano, inside which they should be having a cup, in which, you must be having baking soda readily already there. I mean, baking soda already present in the cup, present inside this little child-made volcano. Then afterwards, what you do is you can slowly add vinegar. Now, if you're able to, add a little colored, add some food color, then what we find is you can get the color effect also. So when this is slowly, gently added to the soda, once again, the same reaction. And what happens is the carbon dioxide, as the reaction happens, it kind of comes out as a froth. And as it flows by the side of the volcano, that gives the experience of a volcanic eruption. So this is again joy for the child to have seen the volcanic eruption. Here's another one. We can have a number of beads or buttons, and take the ones of different sizes and colors. And what we can do is, they're of different sizes. Now take a specific count of each of those, maybe 20 of each, and put it in 3 different containers. The containers should be of the same size. Okay. So your material, that is the bead or the button, that is going to be of different sizes. So if you're counting 25 or 20 of each and putting in the 3 containers, you can see what is the level. Obviously, the level will be different. That tells them something, that number of units is going to matter when you're going to take the weight of the object. Now the same way, if you're going to take, the same number of each, the level is going to differ. If you're going to look at the same level for all the different items, the numbers would differ. So let them try out all these and come to a conclusion. How the size and the shape definitely matters when you're going to see the weight of an object. Now this is another very interesting thing, where we talk of motion of objects, we talk of force. So these are things which we students will be repeatedly reading as they move up from standard 4 up to the high school and higher secondary. So we can take a plain cardboard or a plywood, small one, maybe 1 to 1.5 feet. A rectangular, this thing would be fine, a length of 1.5 feet, and maybe a breadth of 0.75 to 1 foot. That should be fine. So what we do is we keep this particular surface, inclined, and one end, is kept on top of a set of books. So you get that inclination very beautifully. Now you have a number of toy cars, trucks, buses. You get plenty of those. Just allow them to move from the top. Move a little and leave it. Now what you find is each one comes at a different pace to the bottom of that smooth surface. So that again indicates, that the speed with which they travel is going to be different. Now another experiment that can be done is, instead of the smooth surface, try to put something on it, maybe a paper or a cloth, and again allow, the tiny toy vehicles to move down from the top. You'll again see the speed will be very different. In fact, it will be lesser than when it was a smooth surface. Another possibility here is, try to increase, the elevation on one side, so it becomes a steep plane. So now again see, when you allow the vehicles to move, how quickly they come down. So this is how, you find by experiments students can make their own little discoveries. This is one more instance of, the jumping popcorn. So it's again a reaction between vinegar and baking soda. Take it in a jar, and you have all these popcorns added to it. And when the reaction starts, again due to the production of the gas, you'll find the popcorns jumping here and there. Once again, joy in learning. Same way, when we are looking at biology, here we have this concept of, mineral nutrition. So just like humans and animals, plants also need plenty of minerals for their normal healthy growth. And how do plants get them? Yes, we have learned that it is the roots, that absorb the minerals and water from the soil, and they send it to the upper parts of the body on and this is dependent on specific vessels inside the plants, which are called, the xylem. And afterwards, the food that is prepared in the green leaves is brought down through the phloem. Thereby, there is a circulation of raw materials from the root to the upper parts of the plant, especially the leaves, and transportation of prepared food from the leaf to all over the plant, and especially to the stem and the roots and so on. Similarly, we have the concept of, nitrogen and nitrogen assimilation in the atmosphere. We'll be looking at the nitrogen cycle, which is very beautifully presented. Then we have plans, to improve their yields. Man is now, putting in a lot of fertilizers, but care should be taken that instead of artificial, natural fertilizers are given to improve the yield of the plant. So thus there are plenty of experiments where the child can actually see. And I'll quickly like to mention here one very simple experiment. We can take the balsam plant, which has got a very delicate and almost a transparent stem. Then what you do is put it in a small bottle. It should not have a big mouth, a narrow mouth bottle, and fill that with a colored solution. You can just add a few drops of red ink or green ink to the water. That gives you the colored solution. Now take this balsam plant, keep it inside this particular bottle filled with the colored water, and leave it aside for 4-5 hours. Maybe when you beginning of the day, when the school starts, you can do this. Means by the end of the day or the last period, you can look at it. Now the child will be surprised to see that the stem of the balsam plant has turned the color either green or red, whichever you had taken in the bottle. How is that possible? That is because the roots absorbed this solution and slowly through the xylem it moved up. This is how actually water and minerals are absorbed by the roots of the plants. Once again, joy in doing and observing and learning. Now, teaching will be more effective if we present science as a way of finding out rather than as a body of facts to be memorized. This is what we saw now. We should emphasize on learning by doing. We need to encourage a lot of interaction among the learners. I always believe that a very silent classroom is not indicative of good teaching at all. Allow the students to talk. You talk to the students while teaching. Move about in the class. That is how there is more participation, interaction, where true learning happens. Adapt science experiences to the learner's development levels. Learners differ on how they operate mentally. So we have to give them experiences that they can fully understand. We need to customize it. And we need to use a variety of approaches in teaching science. Now, let's quickly compare between, that traditional learning and experiential learning. Both learning happens. We had started off with traditional learning. Now we are using the word experiential learning. What's the difference? Traditional learning, the first difference is it is more teacher centric. It is focused on a particular concept. Experiential learning, it is student centric, but here too, we need to have the focus. What is it we are going to learn? The second point of difference, traditional learning, the learning outcomes are recommended to a fixed rubric or scoring system. Whereas in the experiential learning, it is more, the outcomes are more flexible and open. It's not kind of predetermined. Along with the process, you come out with the findings. Now, the third difference between the two, in traditional learning, it aims to explain the knowledge and or the skills by transferring information. So directly, this is what is going to happen. This is what you're going to find. This is how we pass on the message to the learner. Whereas in experiential, there is, the intention to develop knowledge and skills through experience. We do it and see, and then we come up with whatever we have learned. And the fourth difference, in traditional, it is a fixed structure with a high degree of facilitation, and the teacher is there to always help us, guide us. Whereas in experiential learning, there is a more flexibility, and now the teacher moves to the background, allows the student to do things on his or her own. Okay, right. Now, this is interesting. How were things before COVID? So we generally used to see the information, in beautiful, what will I say, the media and all, and very attractively presented. Admissions open from this class to this class. What are the major features of the school? Playgrounds, AV labs, school transport, ECA, CCA. So like that, this is how it used to be described. But how is it in the current times? I wouldn't still say after COVID. It is during COVID. So now it is everything happening at home. So it is an audio visual home school. And here it is, admissions open for classes LKG to 5, and the salient needs at home. You need a study room, you need any medium, by which you can access this knowledge that is being given to you, as a laptop, desktop, smartphone. Then you need speakers for the audio. So see the transformation in the situation of the learner. Now, coming to the next part, fine. We know at this point of time, online classes are here to stay, at least for some time. So how to make our classes interesting? The classrooms are filled with students who have different needs, who come from different educational backgrounds. They have different attention spans and interests. They have different broad language abilities, and they also come from different cultural backgrounds. See, there is so much of diversity in the classroom. That's why, as a teacher, I often used to say, teaching is really a challenging job because you are dealing with live, unpredictable objects. It is not like an office, where it is just the stationery you're dealing with and few grown-up individuals who are more predictable. So the student population, so that is where I always say hats off to all the teachers because they are doing a wonderful job. This is again the typical scenario in these days. Students accessing teachers' class through various media, and how can we deliver it to them? How can we give it to them in the way they want? Create a suitable atmosphere to introduce the topic. Ensure that the audience is attentive, doing a random check of the student's name now and then, and do ensure it's the student who is attending the class and not the parent or the grandparent, because I have come across instances where the parents and grandparents, in the enthusiasm to know what the teacher is telling, it is they who listen to the class. Now the little child would be busy sitting and playing, or taking a little nap or having breakfast. We need to ensure that this doesn't happen. Then we can integrate technology in the form of digital photography, interesting video recordings, internet games, and quizzes. Now, the first point I still say is very, very important, because whenever you are bringing a particular, you're going to teach something, what you do is try to have a little preview of that. Now, say for example, I'm going to talk to my students, about um, those very strange big animals that suddenly became extinct. What I should do, I need to put some, see, even if it's my online class, I'll be having a little screen behind me, so I can put pictures of some dinosaurs, the name of Jurassic Park, so something relevant to that. So when that is my background, even before I start saying something, my students interest has already been generated. It has started off. What is ma'am going to speak today? Are we going to talk about this? Which aspect of this? So that is the way we have to have an introduction of the topic that sets the tone for the subsequent things. Then, to make online classes engaging, we can have music, film clippings, animations, YouTube videos, podcasts, newsfeed. See, now there is everything available in the public domain online. It is just up to us to do a little homework and find out the most suitable ones. I've gathered a few for you. Let us see how they look.
Grammarly does more than catch errors. With Grammarly, you can find really good.
Now, this is very, very interesting. And why I took up this particular video is, generally, I found students, even by the time they reach high school, they are a little confused about how plants get nitrogen. Let's spare a little time to watch this. See how interesting it will be for the child to look at these. Very true. atmospheric nitrogen. Right. So I'm sure that was very interesting. And so the nitrogen cycle generally, where the students find it very difficult to understand. See, it is so beautifully given in this particular video. I'm sure nobody will have any confusion after this. So this is where we just need to do a little homework, locate the right kind of videos and present it to our students. And that makes for very effective learning. The same thing, I've given you a couple of other videos too. So we can take a look at that, at leisure. And you can, once you enter the site, there are so many more for various other topics, class-wise, then complication-wise, because for the younger ones, I would suggest you take the more simpler, with a lot of animation. And for the elder ones, go for a little more sober ones, but still that helps, in making our classes very interesting. Now, here are some more things. While teaching, we should not, continuously go on. I would suggest, maximum at a time, 45 to 50 minutes is optimum. Beyond that, we need to give at least, a 5 or 10-minute break, because that continuous screen gazing and sitting at one place is very irritating for the child. Even adults find it so. Then, while we are doing our online classes, we can certainly have a group discussion or a debate on any of the topics that we have just taught them. This brings in a difference, and the child feels nice and happy, instead of just being a silent, passive learner. Now, he becomes a more participating person. So now the teacher can take a little, background position and let the children have a discussion among themselves. Once in a while, we can have the speeches of some eminent personalities. And here also we can choose people relevant to that particular field and play the speech and then have a discussion on it. This is also very good for the upper primary to the middle school. Now, there are some very interesting games, where the concepts that are taught, the child is able to actually play the game and then discover whatever is already taught, and based on that, something else. So these are the sites which I would suggest, every teacher, especially the primary teacher, sciencekids.co. Please don't miss it. They have got some very wonderful playtime videos. So as you learn, you also play, get some scores, makes it very satisfying, and here it is, enjoyable learning. Same thing here too. Here we are talking of, the sun, light and shadows, and how, when the object, when it is closer to the source of light, what is the shadow like? When the object is farther away, what happens? So how there is, a gradual change in the size of the image formed. This is very beautifully learned using, these videos. And this is where, we talk to children about how our shadows, are lengthier in the mornings and evenings and shortest at noon. So from morning to noon, gradually it becomes smaller. And again, from noon towards evening, once again, the shadows lengthen. And we can also, in the process, talk to them about the position of the sun in the sky, having a role to play in the size of the shadows. And on moonlit nights, how even the moon has a role to play in creating shadows. So definitely make a point to visit this particular site and find out some very interesting games for the children to play and learn. Right. Here are some more methods, for teaching concepts to children in a very interesting way. Hands-on learning. Here, the children actively participate to experience a scientific concept rather than just being spectators. Here, we could have learning sound and communication by using, the string telephone. I'm sure all of us know when we were kids, we used to have two matchboxes, a long thread tied to the two. So one child would be in one particular place or one room and the other one a little away, and they try to communicate. Now, of course, the scenario has changed with, I think, even the smaller children's having mobile phones, which are not very healthy. But this is again, a precursor of the telephone. Then we can have matchsticks, to learn about the 3D structures of various things, how you can arrange it and understand it. This especially works, for cubes and cuboids and mathematics. Then for learning about rotation motion, the notch pencils, and how as it revolves or rotates, we can understand how the motion differs. And then we have a lot of instances of storytelling, whether it is a law of physics or the facts of biology. We can tell them to the students by way of stories, and stories are better remembered than just facts. Even to this day, whenever I talk to students about this flotation and the discovery of the word eureka, how the scientist, when the idea just came to him, he uttered the word eureka. So even now, when we tell that story, the child is more interested and he retains that information much better. Then sports-based teaching, what is this? Now, there are students who enjoy learning by, playing through games. How could this be? See, we can have a game of cricket or a football game during the PT period. And here we can use several aspects of that to learn some of our subject. Now, let us take the cricket matches, for example. You have, so many globally known tournaments. We have the IPL, we've got the World Cup and test matches and all. So what do we do at the end of every series or every tournament? Very often we see, which batsman is the batsman with the highest average, which bowler has been most economical. So what are we doing? We are trying to calculate that. And this is where, we make use of averages, percentages. So you are enjoying the game. We are discussing about the game, but we are also able to learn some mathematical concept. Similarly, when we look at the game of football, very often we see the player from the opposing side, he kicks the ball towards the goal post. Now, what does the goalie generally do? He tries his best to stop the ball from going into the goal post. So he comes and blocks the way so that sometimes, the ball flies back or it stops. Now, in either cases, we can talk of the laws of motion, the role of force. What is happening? When the player kicked the ball towards the goal post, then if the goalie stopped it, we can say force has been used to stop the motion of the ball. Otherwise, if it kind of deviated and went in another direction, when he just, came and put his hand against the flying ball that was coming towards him. So here we can say this force has been used to change the direction of the moving object, the ball. So once again, you see a game going on in a very thrilling way. And after the game, when we come to class, we can discuss about, certain concepts of our lessons in or through these games. Okay, then in the same way, we have many other sports, gymnastics, athletics, swimming, rowing, paragliding, etc. Where several such concepts, if we think about it a little, we can beautifully tell it to the children. Next, certain subjects, and I would here say that as far as biology is concerned, this is where, there are huge, big words, especially when you move to the higher classes. Children find it very difficult to pronounce them and they hardly remember those. But I found it, very easy. If you could split that word into tiny parts, give the meaning of each, and then give it to the children, the retention is much better. And here I've given you a small example, prokaryote. For this, I can have two words, pro plus karyon. Pro meaning primitive or earlier, and karyon meaning nucleus. Eukaryotic, U plus carry-on, U meaning true, carry-on meaning nucleus. What are we talking about? Prokaryotic means these are organisms having a primitive nucleus. Eukaryotic means these are organisms having a true nucleus. I found whenever I had split up birds and taught my students, they had absolutely no problem remembering it. In fact, when they would answer me, they would also tell me the same very thing, which shows that they have retained it very well. Now, virtual science labs, fine. Even now, we have plenty of virtual science labs available on the open source platform, and just one is given to you. So here too, we can, visit and pick up those that are relevant to our topics. And this helps, learning things without actually experiencing it. Now, many children, they kind of have a distaste for, looking at the preserved specimens in the bio lab, then carrying out, dissections and all. Now here, this is very helpful because that stench doesn't really sound pleasant to them. That puts off many children. Similarly, when doing chemical reactions, especially in the higher classes, see, sometimes, by howsoever careful the teacher and the children are, sometimes, there are chances of chemical reactions leading to burns. This too can be avoided by taking the help of virtual science labs. Then quiz programs. Now we have plenty of apps for quiz programs that help the student engage both in online or offline quizzes. This can be used to conduct intra-section, inter-section, inter-school quizzes, and children really enjoy doing it. Then there are certain concepts which, in the form of a song, it is taught to the student, which makes it more interesting for the student. Now here's one which is really nice. Very, very nice. That was nice, very nice. So see how very beautifully, the whole thing has been presented in such an interesting way to the student. Now, there's yet some other way, by which we can make things very interesting to the child, like visual comprehension. Now, certain things, like when we just put it in the form of a theory or a statement, nobody wants to take it. And even though it's got its own practical applications and there is a scientific reason behind, unless, it is done in the way it ought to be done, nobody understands. Take the small example, why we shouldn't talk while eating. They normally say, no, elders in the family don't talk, don't giggle when you're eating. That is because, as the food is being swallowed, then if there is this jerky motion of talking or giggling, the food, instead of going to the food pipe, it enters the windpipe. And that is where, you'll end up with a bout of cough, or, sometimes you feel the food has entered your nasal passage. This is because, there is that little door which is common to both the food pipe and windpipe. And only when the food pipe is working, the windpipe is closed. When the windpipe is working, the food pipe is closed. So when suddenly, we talk or giggle while eating, what happens is, one is not, the door is not able to understand what's happening. And that is where there is a whole lot of confusion. Now, let's look at another method. It is simulation. In simulation here, what happens is, like the process, it is explained using dummy figures. Here you see, we can see artificial respiration. So this is again very helpful for the students. And if I remember right, these days, firefighting incidents, accidentally if there's a fire or something. So many schools, are having this in their campuses, so that if at all there's an emergency, they know how to, tackle it, how to save themselves. Simulation, very useful in learning. Then there are certain nice programs on various channels on the television and in the various media and the public domain, where, we again convey interesting concepts to the children through funny activities. Here you can see, like this on the left, the person is trying to get down from a moving boat. And we know very well, if you're going to get down from a moving vehicle, you are going to fall down unless you keep running as you get down. So these are small things, which the student can learn, and save himself. Here's again a very, very simple demo that can be done even in online class. You can have two candles, one shorter, another bigger one, and light the smaller one. In fact, light both of them and then cover it with a glass tumbler or a glass jar. Wait for some time, you'll find slowly the bigger candle goes off. This is because the gas released from both of them. Now from the lower candle, it tends to move up, so that the concentration increases around the bigger one, and that puts off the burning candle. Because we know air tends to move higher up, hot air. That is it. Then mobile classroom, I think, well, online times are very kind to the teacher, because you can take your classroom wherever you want, provided it's properly matching the concept you want to teach. Say you want to, talk to students about a variety of leaves, the different types. You can walk into a garden. You can sit there or move about and show the children the actual pictures as you are teaching them. This is very much interesting to the child. Then there are certain movies. There are a number of movies in that have been created in our country, which have tackled, concepts of problems in learning among students. How there are certain special teachers in those particular movies that have done a fantastic job. Here is one, movie from Hitchcock, where, a certain concept, how it is taught to the child in a very different way. Now, they say this particular teacher, played by Rani Mukherjee, she was actually trying to show the Tourette syndrome and how she tried to teach the children, because as a student, she never had the luxury of being taught by a teacher in this way. See, many of us certainly, do that. If we missed out something, we try to give our students what we missed out, so that, they don't have the same regret later. Then many a time in our homes, a plumber or an electrician, he comes to repair, certain things. We could, sometimes take a video of whatever work he's doing. See, because he's a professional, he is doing something. So you could just ask him questions. Why do you do this way and all that? And if you take a video of that, and this can be used in the class, to show the children. This is almost like, an open lab, but you're making use of the opportunity that comes your way. Now looking at, so we have finished the teaching process. Now we are looking at the assessment. The different types of assessments are diagnostic, formative, and summative. Diagnostic, as the very name suggests, we identify what is the situation, maybe the current knowledge, maybe a misconception of a particular topic, and afterwards we try to set right. This is good for pre and post assessments. Formative, this is during the instructional process. If we want to get a feedback on, am I teaching the right way? Is my student understanding what he ought to understand? This is the process. And here it is good for viewing growth over time. How much of learning has taken place? And summative, this is used to sum up learning at the end of the instructional process. It is good for assessing mastery and the performance of the child at the end of the process. So all these kinds of assessments are very helpful. Now, here we find that the NEP 2020, it's focusing on an assessment to shift from one that is summative and primarily tests rote memorization skill to one that is regular and formative, is more competency-based, promotes learning and development of our students, and tests higher order thinking skills like analysis, critical thinking, and conceptual clarity. So let us give importance to all these concepts which have been mentioned. Now, there's been a talk about, having exams at the end, for classes 3rd, 5, and 8. Discussion still going on, but one thing is very clear: as far as grade 3 exams are concerned at the end, the focus needs to be to test basic literacy, numeracy, and other foundational skills. Because more or less every year now the ASER reports are not very encouraging. So we as teachers need to do something about it, because only when the basic literacy and numeracy is improved, further learning becomes easy and can be built upon. Then, drawing parallels with international boards, focus is now on reducing content, offering objective and descriptive part in the exams. And now we are talking of having exams twice a year, and the better of the 2 marks can be chosen. Remember, these are not compartment exams. It is an option for the student to improve his performance. Now, with online classes and assessment being the order of the day, that's topmost on the learner's mind. There are many challenges to conducting online exams. We have a limitation on the type of questions. Sometimes there are network and power disruptions. Then sometimes, there could be unethical practices among children, certain children. So what can we do about it? Here are a few suggestions. Up to grade 2, we can use a variety of close-ended objective question and answers. They can be plenty of visual and activity-based questions. Then for the higher classes, we can have, along with the objective, we can have more of subjective. Questions can be a combination of close and open-ended. We can have activity-based questions, which can really be encouraged. For classes 6 to 8, we continue with both objective and descriptive questions, which are more open-ended. Here we give scope for analysis and higher order thinking skills. And ideally, all assessments should be of a short duration, and maximum 40 minutes. And we need to have it regularly without a very long gap. Yeah. And after the test is done, how is the paper submitted? So here are a few suggestions given. If questions are fully objective, the student should submit the answers within 5 minutes of the completion time. One has to be very, very particular on this. Otherwise, it is giving rise to malpractice. If questions are a combination of objective and subjective, give 5 to 10 minutes to upload the answers. For the smaller children of 1 and 2, where maybe parental help is needed for uploading and all that, Around 15 minutes after the test can be given to upload their answers. So in all, the test is done, uploading has happened. Now next, the teacher has to correct the papers and give the marks to the student. Here too, it is often noticed that even a slight delay in the feedback makes the learner lose interest in his assessment. Now the whole thing then becomes a wasteful exercise. So only when it happens regularly and promptly, the learner continues to have interest in it. Let's remember, assessment is only for learning. It should help both the teacher and the student and the entire system to revise the teaching learning process to optimize learning and development for all the students. Well, that is about how online teaching should happen and how assessments can be made more foolproof. So these are a number of suggestions I've given out of my own experience and hope it is well received. Suggestions are always welcome. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you once again, Dr. Aruna Ravichandran, for agreeing to conduct this webinar. I'm sure the tips and strategies shared by you along with the question answer session will help teachers to enhance the learning teaching experience in their online classroom in these challenging times of pandemic and change. You've given so many tips. We are going to share a handout on the Orient Black Swan Teachers Portal. The handout will have all the links. So teachers, please do visit the portal, download the handout. You will be able to go through all the links and check out the videos that have been shared by Dr. Ravichandran. I would also like to thank everyone for participating in today's webinar. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your apt questions. We do hope to see you again soon. Good day from all of us at Orient Black Swan.
Thank you. Bye-bye.